Doctor.
This meeting is being recorded.
All right. Um, our speakers today are going to be Dr. Pacifici and Dr. Rallapalli. Yeah. So, what is pharmacology? In um, well, Google's definition, pharmacology is the branch of medicine concerned with the uses, effects, and modes of actions of drugs. So, um, how do drugs work? What do they do? And how do we use them? But this branch of science is so much more in depth than that, and we'll talk about that later today. So, um, to just introduce a little bit about the history of pharmacology, pharmacology um, isn't a new science, right? Lots of ancient civilizations use some sort of pharmacology, um, and whether that's using herbal medicine or some sort of alternative medicine, um, that's where pharmacology really did start. And as it's known today, it emerged as its own field in the 19th century, stemming off of the research being done in biochemistry and physiology. Um, Oswald uh, Oswald is known as the father of pharmacology, and he started his own school of pharmacology in the 19th century, studying chloroform, chloral hydrate, and muscarine. Muscarine is actually a heart stimulant, and chloroform is um, a uh, a vapor anesthetic um, vapor that has sedative properties, and some cool fun facts about that. Um, and in 1890, John Jacob Abel um, was the first to chair, or first to be the chair of pharmacology in, I think, the U.S. And his work is first and foremost known for being the first to isolate epinephrine, um, histamine, and to make pure crystalline insulin. So yeah.
And there are multiple main branches of pharmacology, which includes pharmacodynamics, pharmacokinetics, toxicology, and clinical pharmacology. Pharmacodynamics studies the effect of drugs on the body over time. Pharmacokinetics studies how our body absorbs, metabolizes, and excretes the drug. Toxicology studies the adverse effects that the drug may have on the body. And clinical pharmacology studies the therapeutic uses of these drugs and the other bodily factors that may affect the efficacy of the drugs, right? And possible careers in these four branches of pharmacology are pharmacists, pharmacy technician, biochemists, and biophysicists, as well as medical scientists. And so how do you become a pharmacist? What steps do you have to take? First, you go to undergraduate school, and usually people here can get a Bachelor of Science, but you're not limited to that. You can also get a degree in other fields. And then you have three options. You can either go to medical school, get a PharmD, or a PhD. Usually people who want to study pharmacology and take the medical school route, they usually want to become a clinical pharmacologist who usually runs clinical trials on humans. PharmD is the most, it's the professional doctorate that's required to become a pharmacist, while a PhD is also another route that you can take where you can get a doctorate in any discipline, for example, molecular biology. After this, after you go to medical school, get a PharmD or PhD, then you have other three options. If you want to become a practicing pharmacist, you usually get a license, and this will evaluate your general practice knowledge, right? However, if you want to become an independent researcher, then you usually do a fellowship, and this is after you get a PharmD or a PhD or even a medical degree. And for certification, it's usually given by the American Board of Clinical Pharmacology. And this is usually when you go to medical school and if you want to run clinical trials on humans. And there's also multiple careers in pharmacology that you can take, and it can be divided into two sections: clinical pharmacology and applied pharmacology. Clinical pharmacology usually focuses on, it studies the drugs in humans, right? And so you can become a pharmacist under this, and there are multiple different types. You can become a community pharmacist who usually works in like drugstores such as CVS, an industry pharmacist who kind of works behind the scenes. It can be in sales, marketing, or in research and development. And a clinical pharmacist is someone who like, collaborates with these health professionals, and they usually like prescribe and administer medications to treat patients. And this also includes a hospital pharmacologist, cardiology pharmacist, critical care pharmacist, pediatric pharmacist, geriatric pharmacist, and ambulatory care pharmacist. You can also go into applied pharmacology, which is where you usually become a researcher and you analyze and create the drugs, basically. And when you think about going into career or getting a job in pharmacy, you want to think about multiple things. First, you want to think about what do you want to get from this career, not what do you want to do as a career, right? So you have to analyze all your different priorities. What do you like? What kind of lifestyle do you want to live? Do you want to travel a lot? Do you want to have a good work-life balance? Do you want to have a family? Do you want to focus on research, or do you want to work in patient care? And when you analyze all of this, then you can come up with the best job for yourself in pharmacy. And now I would like to introduce our first guest speaker, Dr. Pacifici, who received her BS in biochemistry from UCLA, followed by a PharmD and PhD in toxicology from the University of Southern California. Dr. Pacifici.
So thank you so much, Sonia and Ethan. What a wonderful presentation to kick things off. So let me go ahead and share my screen. And Dr. Rallapalli, please join in the conversation. Sure. As I kind of go through the presentation myself. Let me see. Hold on. There we go. Are you seeing my screen properly? Mm-hmm. Okay. So, as Sonia had mentioned, I'm with USC, and I'm with a department called Regulatory and Quality Sciences. And after today's presentation, if you would like to contact me for discussion or just additional information, please use this email address and feel free to reach out to me. So I think Sonia and Ethan had kicked things off and said, hey, you really, this entire program is meant to guide you to think about where you are headed towards your dream job. And so I want to give you a little bit of a level of comfort to say, well, you don't really have to have your ultimate master plan you just have to kind of follow your interests and think about what are some of the things that you like to do. And you don't have to have that magic path from the get-go. And so I'd like to kind of share with you what my path has been. And my path really has been just following, it's both chance and not only luck, but also kind of being prepared so that when that opportunity shows up, that you are ready to take up that opportunity. So my path has been really based on no master plan, but building on experience and interest. So as it was mentioned, I did my bachelor's degree in biochemistry. And that's just because I like science and math. And I didn't have, really other compelling reason in terms of what my ultimate path was going to be. I'm like, well, biochemistry seems like an interesting path. It combines biology and chemistry, and there's math involved. So I started on that path, and it was interesting. But then toward as I deepened my studies in undergrad, I started thinking about what do I want to do next? And it wasn't really clear to me what I would be doing next. Unlike some of you, some of the things I ruled out. I actually did not want to be a doctor. I did not want to be a dentist. I thought about going into PhD, but I didn't know what that really meant. Like, what does that mean? I wanted to understand what the career path and what the livelihood of something like that path would be. I knew I kind of was interested in pursuing maybe a professional degree. Again, I didn't want to be a lawyer. So I went into pharmacy school. And the reason why I went into pharmacy school was because pharmacology looked interesting to me. Pharmacology for me meant that I could apply my background in biochemistry because drugs work through biochemical pathways, right? We just talked about the kind of the pharmacology is, the pharmacodynamics and pharmacokinetics. So I thought, that's a path I could go follow and try to deepen my understanding and apply my background of biochemistry. The thing is that it was before internet was available. And so I didn't know really what the profession of pharmacy was. I didn't have pharmacists in my family. I was, healthy child, so I never really had to take medications. So I didn't really know what pharmacy practice was until I started pharmacy school. And then once I started pharmacy school, I worked as an intern and I got exposed to pharmacy practice, and I'm like, I could do this. So some of it is, really kind of following your dreams, and some of it is really determining, is this something you could do? And when I started working in pharmacy, I said, well, I could do this. This is, interesting, and I could be good at it. But I also wanted to learn more about research. And so my school, USC School of Pharmacy, has faculty who have research projects. So sometimes when you open your mind and your heart to doing something new, the opportunities would just show up. So I remember the day I said, well, I really want to learn more about research. I ought to get some experience doing research. And lo and behold, I walk out of my lecture hall and run into a flyer that says, looking for students who might be interested in conducting research. And so I took the flyer and I went upstairs to the 6th floor and walked into my next adventure and met my future PhD advisor. So I started doing research with him and I really liked it and I was pretty good at it. And so my advisor said, well, why don't you apply to the PhD program? And so I said, okay, I'll do that. So I applied and I got into a PhD program. And so I obtained both my PharmD and my PhD. I worked as a pharmacist during that time after I got my PharmD license while I was conducting my PhD research. And so in addition to the clinical rotations in school pharmacy, I actually worked as a pharmacist, both in community pharmacy and hospital pharmacy. And I liked it and I was pretty good at it. And so after I completed my PhD, I was at the crossroads of determining what I wanted to do next. I could have followed the basic research track and continued on with my postdoctoral fellowship. I could have stayed on as a pharmacist in the hospital that I was working in. But then I said, well, you know what? I want to do something different. I understand basic research. I understand clinical practice of pharmacy. What I don't understand is how do the findings from my basic research get translated into products that I administer and manage as a clinical pharmacist. For me at that time was that process was a black box because pharmaceutical products are developed and commercialized by companies. So I realized that in order to fill that knowledge gap, I had to go and work in a company. So that's what I did. My next experience was working in clinical research for a biopharmaceutical company. When I arrived there, I was astonished because I really loved the work there. I really loved the environment there. And I said to myself, I wonder why no one ever told me about this kind of opportunity when I was in school. Okay. And I also learned that product development is highly regulated and that how the products are developed in the United States could be quite different from how the requirements are laid out in other countries. So I moved over onto international product development and I got to travel all over the world. My focus area was Asia Pacific, Latin America. And again, I was astonished. I was like, wow, you get to travel for work and you get to meet professionals all over the world and be involved in really interesting work. Again, I said, I wonder why no one ever told me about these types of opportunities when I was in school. Then my advisor, my PhD advisor, contacted me and said, you know, we are starting a program at USC, what's called regulatory science. And it's to educate students about industry opportunities and get them ready to become industry professionals. Do you want to come and join the program? And I was like, yes, absolutely. So I have been back at USC and I'm the chair of the Department of Regulatory and Quality Sciences, educating the next generation of professionals. So my path is grounded on my experience and background in science, healthcare, research, and education, and really built on my interests. And the interests that I have, I like dynamic environment. I don't like to do kind of routine work. I like working with people. That I learned when I was in research, where I prefer people to cells and test tubes. And I like project-based work, and I love to travel. So I think my path really embraces kind of my interests and experiences as laid out here. So, you know, Sonia mentioned how pharmacology goes back to, was it Sonia or Ethan? Talked about how pharmacology goes back to 1890s, right? 1800s. It's an old discipline. Regulatory science is a new discipline. It was founded maybe 20 years ago. So there are, just a few programs around the world, which is kind of exciting. It's almost like 1890 for pharmacology is 2022 for regulatory science. So regulatory science, we get to kind of define regulatory science as a discipline. The way we define it is that regulatory science relates the regulatory and legal requirements of biomedical product development, food and dietary supplements, to the scientific research needed to ensure the safety and efficacy of these products. What does that mean? That means that, when we say, oh, a product works, when we say a drug works, what does that really mean? Well, that means that there is scientific evidence based on data that demonstrates that the product works to the level that it meets the regulatory requirement to be allowed to be commercialized. So everything, when you say something is safe, when a drug is safe, that also relates to scientific evidence based on data. When you say a drug is of high quality, it's not just a testament by experts. It really is to say that there is data that demonstrates that the product meets the quality standard. So now more than ever, through this COVID pandemic, we see regulatory science is all around us. It's kind of a fun time for me as an educator in this discipline, because what's happening, the silver lining of what's happening around the world is that we can see regulatory science in action. So the entire world becomes our classroom. Everything from our concerns regarding accuracy of diagnostics to our hopes for safe and effective medicines and vaccines. Regulatory science also impacts everyday products that we use or wear, or the food that we consume, and even the products that we use to care for our animals. These are all products that are regulated by the US Food and Drug Administration. And then underneath these headlines that we see every day, like development of vaccines and the off-label use of drugs, are regulatory concepts regarding the importance of clearly demonstrating safety and efficacy of products before they become widely available. So in our program, we focus primarily on products that are regulated by the FDA. And it turns out this is a huge sector. FDA regulates about $2.6 trillion of products a year, which represents something between 20 cents and 25 cents of every dollar spent by American consumers. So Sonia is wearing eyeglasses, that's a medical device. You eat cereal, that's food. You all received COVID vaccine, that's regulated by the Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research under the FDA. So I'm sure that these products affect all of you. And it requires a huge village of people to work on these areas. And there's a high demand for this specialized field. So if you look at just regulatory affairs area, we're looking at something like at any one time, this is just this regulatory, it's not looking at clinical research or, quality area. The open positions are vast. We're looking at 80 to 100,000 people in this specialized field. If you look at all the demand in the entire industry, we're looking at hundreds of thousands to millions of positions that are open, and that those are very difficult to fill. And we see current and projected job growth over time. In terms of looking at the educational background, clinical sciences, life sciences, technical sciences, public health, so you can have a pretty diverse educational background. Does not necessarily have to be doctoral degree, although you may have PharmDs and MDs in this industry. The industry really needs a lot of people at various levels, and these are just showing some salary figures, just examples, but you can easily find this information in Indeed and Glassdoor. So we talked about the MDs and PharmDs and other doctoral levels, but for those of you, because some of you are high school students as well as undergrad students, you can get positions with different levels of education. So the industry has such high demand for talent that you can get jobs with bachelor's degree with certain areas of focus. You can definitely get jobs with master's degree, or you can get additional degrees and get positions as well. So I guess my take-home message is that you don't necessarily have to say, in order to go into pharmaceutical industry, that you need to get an MD. MD is a great degree. I think medicine is a noble profession that requires really dedicated individuals. But I don't want people to think that the only way you can get a good career is to go for the doctoral degree. It may be that you start off wanting to be a pre-med in college, and then maybe you change your mind and you might say, I wonder what else is out there. And I want you all to be rest assured that there are wonderful professions for you, even if you decide to change your mind later on. I hope that, sometimes students have a pre-med mentality. They go into college and they say, I don't think I want to be a doctor, but I don't know what else I could do. So keep that in mind as you pursue your dreams. Our vision from our program is that our vision is to develop health products leaders for professions that are just beginning to exist. We provide a world-class training ground for talented professionals involved in the development and commercialization of regulated products internationally, because all of these companies are developing products for the global population. So when COVID vaccine is developed, it's not just for people who live in the United States, it's for the global population. So my job has been to expand the opportunities for our students. So like Dr. Rallapalli, pharmacists work with products that are already on the market in the hospital setting, community setting, and ambulatory care setting, or long-term care setting. So there, not only pharmacy practice, but also practice of medicine resides here. But what I want to do is expand your mind to look at opportunities across the entire spectrum of therapeutic development, from basic research to translational research to applied research, from working with test tubes and with computer modeling to animal research to human research, all the way across, because this ecosystem is vast. You could, when we talk about industry opportunities, we talk about companies, but you can be working at NIH, you can be working at healthcare institutions, you can be working at startup companies, you can be working at university settings. You can even work at the Patent and Trademark Office because they need experts to review the patents for innovative products. You can be working at venture capital firms that are investing in innovative products. And then there are also these nonprofit organizations, the patient advocacy organizations like Michael J. Fox Foundation, that requires a lot of talented professionals. And you can also work at the FDA, right? Where does Dr. Anthony Fauci work? He worked at the FDA, at the NIH right here. And then we've seen FDA officials on the evening news as they deliberate approval of vaccines, right? So, but all of these companies and all of these professionals are working together to bring new medicines to patients. So, another way to think about it is that when you are a healthcare provider, a pharmacist or a doctor or a nurse, you are helping patients one at a time individually. But when you are working to bring products for patients across the world by working on new medicines, you are actually, taking care of millions, or in case of COVID vaccine, billions of patients at a time. So it's all about helping patients, but it's just different ways to going about it. I hope that makes sense. And then, I wonder, maybe this is a good time for me to just stop for a second and have Dr. Rallapalli maybe join in on the conversation from the healthcare professional's point of view.
Thank you, Dr. Pacifici, and thank you, Ethan and Sonia. I'm mostly a community pharmacist, and I've been a community pharmacist all along. But the only difference that I've seen is working with chain pharmacies and working for an independent pharmacy is quite different. Because chain pharmacies mostly focus only on profits, their metrics, and along the years, it's like, especially during COVID, it has gotten worse. So I work for an independent pharmacy. We mostly handle medications for geriatric population and assisted living facilities, group homes, nursing homes. And so most of our focus is on them. And since we have baby boomers in the recent times, and they need a lot of pharmacists working for long-term care facilities and working for facilities that supply medications to all these facilities. So our focus is mostly on the geriatric population. And yes, geriatric population do need pharmacists because they're over-medicated. And that's where we come and we are like, no, you don't need so many medications. So we have to counsel the assisted living facilities where they don't administer and sedate every person that's there. And that's why they have a risk of fall. And that's when we come in and we are like, no, you need to limit the usage of your medications. And so we are mostly the bridge between the doctors that tend to overprescribe and also the assisted living facilities that do not really take good care of the geriatric population that we have. But if you're thinking about retail pharmacy, you definitely need to have a passion for it. And you need to be very energetic because it's not the same what it used to be pre-COVID or even like 5 years ago. But again, like Dr. Pacifici said, FDA, NIH, all these, even in terms of clinical aspects, and you have like HIV pharmacists, you have like Coumadin clinic pharmacists. So there are a lot of options that are available rather than retail.
Thank you, Dr. Rallapalli. I think what you bring is a really wonderful facet, because that is something that's been vexing me as well. And it's something that the future generation of Ethan and Sonia and our audience here really need to be thoughtful about. The thing is that our demographic profile is changing around the world, where the aging population of, although in the United States, COVID did take care of 1 million of elderly people. However, still it is true that our population is aging, which means that inevitably we're going to have an increased proportion of our population that is going to be suffering from neurodegenerative diseases. And because of the fact that neurodegenerative diseases are so difficult to treat and have been challenging to find therapeutics for, what happens is that because at some point, these patients are no longer able to take care of themselves, they are, housed in assisted care. And because of the fact that our assisted care system really is mainly focused on just maintaining these patients, it is true that what Dr. Rallapalli says is that a lot of them patients are over-medicated to just keep them sedentary. So they're exactly doing opposite. They're not being cognitively stimulated. They're not being physically, stimulated. They're actually being, essentially tranquilized. And so it's not a terminal thing. So they're in that state for years, which makes it very, very difficult. So this is really a huge problem for the next generation to think, to address in many facets, in how the assisted living facilities are organized and run, and how the medical devices are developed to help people live and be in their own homes and to be able to functional be functional for as long as they can be. And then for pharmaceutical companies to come up with therapeutics that actually work to reverse or slow the progression of these neurodegenerative diseases. But drug development is really difficult and really expensive. Maybe 1 out of 10,000 molecules ever make it to be a successful drug. It takes something like 14 years for a new drug to come to the market. And it takes something like $2 to $3 billion. So this is not for the faint-hearted or for the poor companies to pursue. And diseases like Alzheimer's disease, very difficult to treat. In fact, over the course of the last 30 years, we've only had 4 products that came to market, and we've had like 130 products that have failed. But none of these products actually slow the progression of disease or reverse the course of the disease. None of these are all really, these only address symptomatic attributes of the disease. So we are looking for the disease modifying therapeutics for these neurodegenerative diseases. We haven't been able to find it yet. So we're looking for your generation to come up with those solutions. It is, the brain is the final frontier for therapeutic development. And we need a big breakthrough to understand the beta amyloid. Unfortunately, the beta amyloid hypothesis is really not been promising. That the last clinical trial that was conducted by Roche in South America is kind of hammering the nail in the coffin of this theory. So we are almost back to square one to understand the pathogenesis of Alzheimer's disease so that we can come up with some meaningful solutions for this disease. So it takes a long time, it costs a lot. You have a patent term that you have to consider. So the companies have a limited time during which they need to develop and commercialize these products. And I think Oh, so what I wanted to show you is that this is something that Dr. Rallapalli is very familiar with, which is the package insert or prescribing information. This, you may say, huh, what does, $2.6 billion and 15-year get you? This is what the company's final product is, a product that gets approved with a package insert that has been approved by the FDA. So this is kind of the Bible for a product. And so the regulatory strategy, why is regulatory and quality sciences important in this process? Well, the regulatory strategy drives the product strategy that ultimately drives the business strategy. And so because you have to think about it, okay, when we talk about the how clinical trial is designed, how clinical trial is designed will ultimately determine how the product will be used, right? And so that the entire clinical and regulatory strategy becomes core to the business strategy of this entire industry. So what does this space look like? When we look at who hires the professionals, these are, you can see all the familiar names of companies. Some of these are big companies, but also there are many small companies. You should not only think about pharmaceutical companies, but you can also think about medical devices companies as well. So this is kind of where I wanted to end today's conversation, and in terms of thinking about, what does this space actually looks like? And I think I have, we can talk more about other parts of this conversation. There's obviously, you can have a whole master's degree on this topic. So what I'm just trying to give you is a little sampling of it. And maybe what I do is I stop here and open the conversation up for questions from the audience. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Ethan and Sonia.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Pacifici, for that presentation. And I think we have a couple of questions from the audience that they've submitted. All right. Let me just pull the questions up. Let's see. All right. So first question. Is there any advice you would give students right now who are trying to join the pharmaceutical field? Is there any advice that you would give them?
Yes, absolutely. Where do I start? Where do I end? It depends. If you're a high school student, I would say, you would want to, you're doing the right thing by joining a program like this where you get to hear from professionals. You should start looking at internship opportunities in the companies. Some companies have internships for high school students as well, or college students. You would want to pursue a college degree in pharmacology or other areas. If you're interested in, for example, medical devices, you might want to go into biomedical engineering. At USC, we actually have a pharmacology and drug development program. So you can start learning about drug development from your freshman year. And so it would be a combination of work and experience. What that allows you to do is that it allows you to see if you like the people and you like the work and you like the environment. In many ways, I think for people like us who are interested in the life sciences field, pharmaceutical industry, depending on kind of the company, it's almost like you could be kind of you could find your way to kind of the Disneyland of scientists.
I think there's a question in the chat. Someone asked, are there usually summer internships?
Most of the time, yes,
Oh, yes.
especially if you're a college student. NIH does have summer internships, but again, I think they are not open for high school kids. I think they're only open for undergraduate kids. NIH, I know that. And then you can probably like have some internships in VA, like if you for high school. I think VA does have it for college kids too. Like you can see like various devices, and you can get an idea of various medical devices and orthopedic devices.
Oh, I think Simi has a question.
Yeah, hi. I think it was very useful to hear about like the education pathway, as most of us are like students like pretty early on in this path. I was wondering if we could hear like another type of education experience with Dr. Rallapalli. I don't know if you could share a little bit about your pathway.
I had my bachelor's in pharmacy, then I wanted to go towards industry. So I had my master's in pharmaceutical chemistry, but then I thought it was too dry and I was always a people person. So then I said, okay, let me get my license, and I started working. Eventually from like retail industry now, it's not as good as it used to be. Now it's very stressful, even like financial aspect, it's not the same as when we started it. And it's, you have to juggle between, you have to be multitasking all the time. I'm sure you probably hear from most of the pharmacists. Nobody even has time to look at you. So, but then hospital pharmacies do have a lot of scope for which they really want you to have a fellowship or postgraduate PGY1 or PGY2 internships lately, which are more focused on a particular field you want to go into. Like you could be a cardiac pharmacist, or like Coumadin clinics, you can be like work HIV or pediatric pharmacists, different pharmacies. Then you have long-term care facilities, which are definitely picking up. It's like a multi-billion-dollar industry now because of the booming population. And for that, you do have a lot of regulations. And then most importantly, you have opportunities with insurance companies, which tell you what you can take. Even they even try to tell the doctors what they can prescribe and what they cannot prescribe. It doesn't matter. It doesn't. For them, patient interest doesn't matter. So a lot of insurance companies are hiring pharmacists for their PBMs right now. And yeah, if you want to go towards community hospital pharmacies, those are your options right now.
So Dr. Rallapalli, what does your like typical day as a pharmacist look like? Like what are the main events that happen during your day?
It depends. Right now where I work, it's mostly like closed door. I don't like deal with a lot of patient population. That's very limited right now because like I said, we supply mostly to nursing homes and assisted living facilities. So for that, you got to be very careful. But if you're talking about retail aspect, like a CVS pharmacist or a Walgreens pharmacy, it's very busy because pharmacists genuinely there don't have time, because everything is metrics for big corporations right now. Because in 1 minute they expect you to do so many prescriptions, or they want you to do vaccinations. They want you to be multitasking. So it's definitely, if you're working for a big chain pharmacy, it is very busy. There's no time to even sit down.
So are there like specific skills or like abilities that are like necessary to become like a pharmacist?
It depends upon, like Dr. Pacifici said, which depends upon which pharmacist you want to be. If you want to be a retail pharmacist, it's multitasking. And you have to be a people person. And patience. Patience to deal with people. Because at the end, like last person they come to is a pharmacy. They'll be waiting in the doctor's office for hours. Then they come to the pharmacy. They want everything now. So you need to have patience and a smile.
I think we have another question. How long does it typically take to get a medical device or medication approved?
Well, it depends.
It depends.
Typically, for example, if it's a drug for a diabetes product, it may take up to 10 to 15 years. And that's because you have to go through different phases of approval, phases of clinical trial. You have the early phase clinical trial. You have bench science, animal science, and then clinical science that you have to go through. Now, if you have a drug for a very small population, we call orphan drugs for rare diseases, you're not going to have thousands of patients that you can conduct clinical trials on. And so you can actually, and usually these diseases are very severe, serious, and life-threatening diseases. So FDA will allow you to get to the market faster with smaller trials. And so you could potentially get to the market within a few years for some drugs. Now for COVID vaccine, for the mRNA vaccine by Pfizer and Moderna, the process was very short. And that is because they were able to do a lot of activities concurrently. So instead of having phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and spread out, they were able to do in one clinical trial, for example, they had phase 1, 2, and 3 all wrapped up in one clinical trial. The other thing is that they were able to manufacture at risk. Most companies will wait until your phase 2 trials show favorable result before they scale up the manufacturing. In case of the COVID vaccines, it was part of the Project Warp Speed, where companies were paid to manufacture at scale from the very, very beginning, so that as soon as the product showed safety and efficacy, the vaccine showed safety and efficacy, they were able to get the data to the FDA right away. FDA authorized it for emergency use right away. And by that time, the companies had already scaled up. So they had the number of doses that they could deliver to the healthcare professionals.
All right, thank you. Let's see. So I know we said that there were a lot of opportunities for college students and not that many for high schoolers. So what would you recommend to a high schooler that wants to get more experience in pharmacology? What would you recommend that they do?
You could probably start by working with a college professor, because sometimes they do let you, like Hopkins, I know, does take kids in their in research department as high schoolers. They let them do internships. So you can work in their labs. To start with, you can do. Hopkins does that. I know UMD, the University of Maryland, does that.
Yeah, and USC does that too. USC has what's called STAR program, and we do work with high school students as well. And that's the thing, is that we do see kind of this, need to develop the talent pipeline. And so we want to start early to allow students to see their path, the different path that they could follow.
But most of the internships are like unpaid. It's if you're working for a lab.
All right. I think we have time for 2 more questions. Are there any skill sets or abilities that you think are necessary to become a successful pharmacist or pharmacologist?
Pharmacists, you just need to have your license, and you have to maintain your continuing education courses. And coming to skill set, if you're working in a hospital pharmacy, you need more skill set. You have to be more focused because you're dealing with IV medications. And whereas pharmacologist industry side, from my experience, it's always good to have a PhD if you want to go high up in the ranks, because starting with just a like PharmD, I don't think you will not go too far, because you'll just be an analytical chemist. That's all.
Right. In the research side, that's true. What Dr. Rallapalli says is very true. But there are opportunities outside of research, which is in clinical research, in clinical trial management, as well as in regulatory affairs and medical product quality. And so though there are many areas where you could go quite far with masters, because they're not really PhD is really not required for those positions. So that might be something that you could look into. Now, in the regulatory and quality arena, which is the area that we focus on, I think of course the basic understanding and intelligence is all taken for granted. But what I think sets the successful professionals apart, the leaders apart, would be the communication skills. As our world becomes really more complex and the science and technology are advancing and the rules and the laws are becoming more, rigorous, we need professionals who can understand that information and be able to communicate across different functions in a way that people can act upon, right? And so it's those skill sets, the oral and written communication skills, that will really differentiate successful professionals from the rest. So if you want to stand out from the rest of your pack, hone your writing skills and speaking skills.
All right, I think that's all the questions that were there. Thank you everyone for joining, and thank you Dr. Pacifici and Dr. Rallapalli for giving us this wonderful advice.
Oh, you're welcome. It's been a pleasure to be here, and please look me up. I'm at USC, and you can just look up my name and you can find my email address and send me a note. Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Have a good night.
Good night.
Bye, everyone.
All right,
Bye-bye.
thank you.
Bye.
Bye, guys.